Good morning and welcome to Issue Specific Hearing 3, which forms part of the examination of the application for the AQUIND Interconnector, Nationally Significant Infrastructure Project. This issue specific hearing addresses a range of environmental matters, specifically those relating to habitats, landscape, the marine environment, noise and socioeconomics. Before we proceed, can I check with the case team that you can hear me and that the recording has started?
Good morning, Mr. Mann. Heaven Jones, the case manager. I can confirm that I can hear you clearly and the recording has started. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Please could all participants ensure that they are muted unless invited to speak, and please turn off your mobile phones unless they are being used to access this hearing. We would also ask you to keep your cameras switched off whilst you are not speaking. This hearing is taking place virtually online on the Microsoft Teams platform, but the format, content and procedure will be very similar to the traditional face-to-face hearings that have been held for previous DCO examinations. We will go through the usual introductions and introductory remarks for the record and for the benefit of new participants and those watching the live stream and the digital recording. I am Andrew Mann. I was appointed on the 12th of February 2020 under Section 65 of the Planning Act 2008, under delegation from the Secretary of State as the lead member of a panel to examine this application. I have a background in ecology and environmental impact assessment, and I'm a chartered environmentalist and a chartered landscape architect. My fellow panel members were appointed on the same date, and I'll ask them to introduce themselves, starting with Mr. Wallace.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. My name is David Wallace. I'm a chartered member of the Royal Town Planning Institute, and I have academic qualifications in environmental planning. I'll hand over to Mr. Roscoe.
Good morning, I'm Stephen Roscoe. I'm a chartered civil engineer and I have a background in engineering and development.
Thank you both. And can I also mention our colleagues from the Planning Inspectorate case team who are working with us on this examination, some of whom you will be familiar with already. Heaven Jones is the case manager and he is accompanied today by two case officers, Stephen Parker and Paige Hall. You will find information about the application and documents produced for this examination on the Planning Inspectorate's National Infrastructure website. This has a landing page for this project and further pages that set out examination procedure, the examination timetable, relevant representations and examination documents. Our Rule 8 letter of Tuesday the 15th of September 2020 includes the web address. The hearing is being held on Microsoft Teams, but the chat function is not in use today. The examining authority will invite participants to speak at appropriate times, but should you wish to make an urgent comment, you may use the hand up function, though please be advised there may be a delay before we see it, and please do wait to be invited to speak. Telephone participants should clearly state their name if they wish to make an urgent comment, but again, please wait to be invited before making your contribution. Please speak loudly and clearly when you are making submissions, especially those on the telephone. The applicant has arranged for the hearing to be live streamed on the website of Production 78. Please be aware that the chat function on the Production 78 webpage is not in use. Please could those watching the live stream refresh their browser after each break to ensure that they do not miss the restart. If you participate in the hearing, it is important that you understand that you will be recorded and live streamed, and that a digital recording with subtitles will be published. It will be made available on the project page of the National Infrastructure website that I referred to earlier. The Planning Inspectorate's practice is to retain the recordings for a period of 5 years from the Secretary of State's decision on the Development Consent Order. Because the digital recording is retained and published, it forms a public record that can contain your personal information and to which the General Data Protection Regulation applies. To avoid the need to edit the digital recordings, please do not add information to the public record that you wish to be kept private and confidential. If you or we consider that there is no alternative to the disclosure of such information, we will agree a process to enable it to be made available without it forming part of the public record. Mr. Roscoe will be taking note of any post-hearing action points that arise during the course of the hearing, and he will seek to agree these with the applicant before we close the hearing. And Mr. Wallace will now take us through agenda item 2.
Thank you very much. This is a hearing into a number of environmental matters where it is felt that they would benefit from the giving of oral evidence. The examining authority have issued a detailed agenda, to which I hope you all have a copy to hand, or which you may download from the project pages of the National Infrastructure website. The agenda is set out in the form of questions that the examining authority wishes to explore in this hearing. Before I explain how we will deal with the questions today, we have exceptionally agreed to allow the local Member of Parliament, Mr. Stephen Morgan, to make a 5-minute presentation to this hearing. So, Mr. Morgan, if you are ready, I will hand over to you and we welcome your contribution.
Thank you very much for that, and good morning. I'm very grateful to the Examining Authority for providing this opportunity for me to present the views of my constituents on the AQUIND development. Since 2018, I've been listening and representing concerns of local people on this development. I have received dozens and dozens of emails, messages, letters, canvassed residents' views through survey work, and met the applicant on a number of occasions and attended a public consultation. I've since submitted formal evidence to the Examining Authority and the applicant, and have written separately to ministers and submitted written parliamentary questions on this matter of importance to my constituents. Today, I want to reiterate my concerns, as well as those of the City Council, and formally place my objection on behalf of constituents on record to the Examining Authority. The construction of the proposed interconnector would take up to 7 years and would cause untold damage and disruption to people, businesses and our environment in Portsmouth. The proposed corridor where trenching is due to take place threatens to disrupt key elements of transport infrastructure, including highways that act as vital arteries for our city. The City Council believes that there will be significant disruption to residents, from noise to antisocial hours to dust and loss of natural light, in a wide-ranging area from Farlington Avenue in the north down to Fort Cumberland in my own constituency. This has certainly been reinforced by those constituents I've spoken with. This congestion and disruption will inevitably have a detrimental impact on local traders who have already endured a year of lost revenue and unprecedented uncertainty. It will also cause long-term disruption to Portsmouth's valued open spaces, with the unmitigated loss of recreational space at Milton Common and Farlington playing fields. A season of more play would be lost at Farlington, Baffins and the University of Portsmouth, with few alternatives in the meantime. In addition to the air pollution created by construction, there is a risk to our city's precious wildlife at Milton Common. I've raised before the threat that the development poses to local allotments, which have been a lifeline for those who tend to them, particularly during the pandemic. As it stands, the planning applicant has been unable to demonstrate sufficiently to the people of Portsmouth and elected representatives any positive benefit that this scheme would bring to the city. Throughout this process, there have been concerns about the transparency of the applicant and its apparent inability to disclose information necessary to fully assess the impact of the proposed development. I'm aware that changes would have been made to the proposed route, but I know many remain concerned that more could be done to engage with those impacted by the construction and avoid the worst of its effects. Constituents also continue to be troubled by reports of the applicant's previous donations to a political party and concerns by the project company's financial and domiciliary arrangements. Whatever the apparent merits of this project may be at a national level, to ignore the overwhelmingly negative impact it would have on Portsmouth's people, businesses and the environment would be a dereliction of duty. Ultimately, it's extremely disappointing that the decision on this proposal has been taken away from the local planning authorities like the City Council, which would be much better able to reflect the views of local residents. On behalf of residents across Portsmouth South, I would therefore like to record my objections on behalf of constituents. I would urge you to ensure the views are raised by residents are given a strong hearing so that objections are heard loud and clear. Thank you. Thank
you very much, Mr. Morgan. That's much appreciated for your time today. I will not be expecting the applicant to respond at the current time. Obviously, this is an unscheduled point to the agenda beforehand, and therefore, if the applicant could respond at deadline 6 with any comments they wish, that would be most welcome. Thank you. Continuing on then with this agenda item, I will shortly ask other people who are intending to speak today to introduce themselves. In most instances, the questions are aimed at the applicant for a response. Once the applicant has given their answer, the examining authority will invite responses to see what is said from participants. In other cases where the question is aimed at a particular interested party, that party will have a chance to set out their answer before a response is invited from the applicant. The examining authority may ask questions at any time. In all cases, the applicant will be offered the last word. In common with earlier issue-specific hearings, we are aware that some of the agenda items have at least been partially addressed in documents submitted to us at a deadline 4 or deadline 5. In these cases, subject to other parties' comments, we are generally content for the applicant to respond with a very brief summary of the situation and a reference to the relevant submission where appropriate. Speakers will have the opportunity to provide us with a written summary of their oral submissions, together with any supporting evidence, by deadline 6 on the examination timetable, which is Wednesday, 23rd of December 2020. The applicant will also be invited to respond to the points made in writing by the same deadline. In terms of speakers, I would like to confirm for the purposes of the public record, those parties who are here today wishing to speak. When I call you, please identify yourself with your name and your role at the organisation where applicable. Starting then with the applicant's representative, please.
So thank you and good morning. My name's Simon Bird, Queen's Counsel, instructed by Herbert Smith Freehill, and I, together with Mr. Martin Jarvis of Herbert Smith Freehill, will be appearing on behalf of the applicant today. And as far as our principal team is concerned, that with Mr. Ian Ellis of WSP, who's an Associate Director in the Ecology team at WSP, holds a Masters in Research in Ecology and Environmental Management, and is a member of the Chartered Institute of Ecology and Environmental Management, and he is the ecology lead in relation to the application, and he's going to be dealing principally with the onshore ecological issues. Secondly, Mr. Ross Hudson of Natural Power, who I previously introduced to the examination, who's dealing with the marine elements of the Habitats Regulation Assessment. We'll then have Ms. Marita Bowden of WSP in relation to the landscape and visual impact assessment issues, and again I previously introduced her to the examination, and she'll be supported as necessary by Dr. McLeod and Mr. Hamid Mojababi of WSP in relation to any engineering issues as they arise which relate to the landscape and visual impact matters. On noise matters, it will be Mr. Tom Farmer of WSP, and he's a senior consultant in the acoustics team at WSP, an associate member of the Institute of Acoustics, and he holds a Master of Environmental Science Honours degree in Environmental Sciences and a postgraduate diploma in Acoustics and Noise Control from the Institute of Acoustics. And then finally, Sir, Ursula Stevenson of WSP, who's a technical director, who holds a Bachelor of Arts degree in Geography and Archaeology and a Master of Science in Environmental Assessment and Management, and she's a full member of the Institute of Environmental Management and Assessment and a Chartered Environmentalist, and so she'll be addressing the socio-economic assessment in due course. That's the team for today, sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much and welcome everyone there. May I ask now who is here representing Hampshire County Council, please?
Good morning, sir. My name is Tim Geimer and I'm the Spatial Planning Lead at Hampshire County Council.
Thank you very much, Mr. Geimer, and welcome. May I ask now who appears on behalf of Portsmouth City Council, please?
Good morning, sir. Selina Cahoon, Council for Portsmouth City Council. I'm here with 5 others, and I'll ask them to introduce themselves subsequently, but I will just list their names. Firstly, Miss Astill, and then Edward Chatwin Stapleton, David Stribling, Andrew Knight, and lastly, instructing solicitor Kieran Laven. I'll just ask them to introduce themselves, as I say.
Okay, thank you.
Hello, I'm Lorraine.
Hello there.
Lorraine Astle. I'm from Regulatory Services. I cover the noise aspect. My role has been covering noise for 20 years, and I've also got a postgrad diploma in noise and acoustics.
Thank you.
I'm on mute.
Mr. Stapleton, that's it.
Yes. Good morning, sir. Sorry, on mute. Quoted the air. My name is Mr. Chetwynd Stapleton. I am a chartered town planner. I'm a development management team leader here at Portsmouth City Council, and I'm assisting the Portsmouth City Council AQUIND team on planning related matters.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning. My name's David Stribling. I'm from Parks and Recreation. I've worked in parks for 40 odd years now, so I've got extensive knowledge of Portsmouth parks and open spaces.
Thank you very much.
Good morning, my name's Andy Knight and I am Arboricultural Officer for the planning team at Portsmouth City Council.
Thank you.
And lastly, good morning, sirs. My name's Kieran Laven. I'm a solicitor for Portsmouth City Council.
Thank you very much. Welcome all. May I ask now who is here on behalf of Winchester City Council, please?
Good morning, sir. I'm Stephen Cornwell. I'm the lead officer for Winchester City Council. I'm joined today by 3 other colleagues and I'll let them introduce themselves.
Good morning, sir. Catherine Knight, Head of Legal Services.
Sir, Phil Tidridge. I'm a chartered environmental health practitioner. I'm covering the noise side of things, sir.
Good morning, sir. Stuart Dunbar Dempsey. I'm the council's landscape architect. I'll be covering landscape and visual impact matters for the authority.
Excellent. Thank you very much and welcome everyone. Could I ask now who's appearing on behalf of the South Downs National Park Authority, please?
Good morning, sir. My name's Mike Hughes. I'm a chartered town planner at the South Downs National Park Authority. I'm joined by 2 colleagues today, so if you're agreeable, I'll let them introduce themselves, starting with Robin Butcher. Thank you, sir.
Of course.
Good morning, sir. My name's Robin Butcher. I'm a chartered member of the Landscape Institute, an external consultant working for the South Downs on their landscape and visual impact issues.
Thank you.
Good morning, sir. My name is Ben Terry. I'm a design officer for the National Park.
Thank you very much and welcome everyone. Could I ask now who is appearing on behalf of East Hampshire District Council, please? I'm expecting Miss Charlotte Adcock. Are you there?
So this is Phil Tidridge from Winchester City Council. I have spoken to Charlotte Adcock. She's in agreement for me to represent the view jointly of East Hants, Havant and Winchester on noise, sir.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much for that clarification. That's much appreciated. Finally then, last but by no means least, who appears on behalf of the Marine Management Organisation, please?
Good morning, sir. I'm Jennifer Ford and I'm a case manager at the Marine Management Organisation. We also have Daniel Walker, who's a case officer.
Thank you very much and welcome. Thank you everyone for those introductions. Is there anyone else here wishing to speak who have not yet introduced? Okay, nothing heard. Just to remind everyone that we have a lot to get through today, and although we are under no particular time constraints, in order to make best use of the hearing time and to ensure fairness, please do not repeat points that have been made by others. Be assured that we have understood the point and we have heard it. I should also point out that if you bring up matters which are not relevant to the examination, we may interject to explain this and ask you to move on to your next point. Please also refrain from disrupting or interrupting the event. This will be unhelpful to you as it is to us. We will be seeking to adjourn for regular breaks to ensure no one suffers from screen fatigue during the proceedings. Lunch will be convened at an appropriate time. I would encourage you all to keep connected to this hearing during the breaks and lunchtime to avoid confusion and the need to re-log into the hearing. At such times, turning your microphone and camera off will suffice for your privacy. Please note that those watching the live stream may need to refresh their browsers after a break to continue watching. I'll now hand over to Mr. Mann to take us through agenda item 3.
Thank you, Mr. Wallace. Agenda item 3 relates to the Habitats Regulation assessment, and the first point here was the visual disturbance as a likely significant effect in the Habitats Regulations assessment, and this was in relation to Brent geese and other qualifying features of the Chichester and Langston Harbour SPA and Ramsar site. We were aware there was an earlier difference of opinion between the applicant and Natural England in relation to the inclusion of visual disturbance for the European site and for the supporting habitat, but this has now been addressed. And we note that the HRA report and matrices have been updated to include potential visual disturbance effects at stage 2 of the HRA. We also have a written response from Natural England at deadline 5 that confirms that the applicant's proposed screening mitigation is an acceptable approach and that it has addressed Natural England's concerns. It's unfortunate Natural England are not with us today, but can the applicant add anything to that summary?
So we have nothing to add as far as the applicant is concerned.
Thank you. Does anybody else wish to make any sort of representation on this agenda item? In which case we'll move on to B, which is a request for the applicant to provide an update on the HRA and the extent of progress towards common ground with Natural England. The statement of common ground submitted earlier in the examination suggested that all matters have been resolved, but we note that the document was still labelled draft. We have also seen the updated statement of common ground at deadline 4. Beyond what we've just discussed in the first item, is there anything further that the applicant can add by way of updates and timetables for this, please?
So I'm going to ask Mr. Ellis to respond to that, if I may.
Thank you.
Good morning, sir. Yes, I'm aware that there are 2 statements.
Mr. Ellis, you're very, very faint. I can't hear you. Could you try a bit closer to the microphone?
I can try, sir. Is that any better?
That's a little better. The nearer you get, the better it gets.
Okay, thank you. I was saying that you might be aware that.
No, I'm sorry, Mr. Ellis, we can't hear you. Can I just check it's not me? Can the case team hear Mr. Ellis?
I'm Mr. Mann, Heaven Jones, case manager. I'm the same as you. Mr. Ellis has appeared. It's sounding very quiet.
Thank you very much. The fallback position is always the headphones and speaker. Give it another go, Mr. Ellis.
Thank you, sir. Can you hear me now?
Oh, that's perfect. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. Yes, indeed. Good morning. There are 2 statements of common ground between the applicants and Natural England, one covering marine matters, one covering onshore matters. With regard to onshore matters, the statement of common ground was submitted at deadline 5, and within that statement of common ground, as we've touched upon in the previous question, all HRA matters are agreed. There are other outstanding matters outside of Habitats Regulation assessment, which are subject to further update at deadline 6. If I may pass over to my colleague, Mr. Hodgson, who could comment on the marine matters statement of common ground.
Thank you, Mr. Ellis.
Morning, Russ Hodgson for the applicant. Just regarding marine matters, the marine statement of common ground basically confirms that all matters regarding the HRA are resolved. Again, only issues outstanding with Natural England are on non-HRA matters and refer to and cover arbitration and appeals and the deemed marine licence. I'd also provide an update regarding the draft watermark. This was the statement of common ground was resubmitted at deadline 4 with this removed. So that matter should be rectified. And I would also add that the marine statement of common ground is a joint SOCG between ourselves, JNCC and Natural England. And we've received a signature from JNCC to add to the statement of common ground, which will be submitted at deadline 6.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hodson. It's very useful. Does anybody else wish to make a comment on this particular point? Nothing heard there, so let's move on.
So if I may, Mr. Mann, sorry.
Sorry, who's that? I can't see.
Edward Chetwynd-Saleton, Portsmouth City Council. Just very quickly, just to seek confirmation from the applicant that they are going to be submitting something at deadline 6 regarding paragraph 4.2.7 in the Natural England onshore statement of common ground regarding the Milton Commons sink. Thank you.
Does the applicant have a response to that, Mr. Bird? Mr. Ellis?
Yes, indeed. We'll be providing an update on 4.2.7. Those conversations in Natural England regarding Milton Common are ongoing, and we will provide an update on the status of that at deadline 6.
Thank you, Mr. Ellis.
Thank you.
That answers your question. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mann.
No problem. Okay, let's move on to C in that case. And this refers to our first written question, HAB 1118, where we asked Natural England to provide electronic copies of the conservation objectives for the relevant European sites. We were referred to in the answer to links to external websites. We have a concern that this information is technically not in examination because those links could break, or indeed the objectives could theoretically change during or after the examination. And we did ask if it was possible for the applicant and Natural England to agree the information and for the applicant to submit it into examination. We've had a response from Natural England, and there's been a more general discussion between Natural England and the Planning Inspectorate on this. There are certain issues which we do understand with the maintenance of those conservation objectives. Nevertheless, could the applicant explain the approach that was taken to conservation objectives and supplementary advice attributes in the relevant tables in Chapter 10 of the HRA report, where there do seem to be some links to the Natural England website for that full information? Is it possible to upgrade those links such that we do have the full information when we produce our REIS in February and when we finalise our recommendation to the Secretary of State? We're aware the Secretary of State also requires the current background information when he considers his decision and when he undertakes his appropriate assessment. As such, it would be beneficial for the examination to see a full set of available conservation objectives at the time of the examination as part of the full HRA audit trail, rather than just a selection of them or a link to a website that could change over time. We are, of course, aware that not all of the European sites currently have published conservation objectives, especially some of the more recently designated ones. So could the applicant just expand, please, on the reasons why it's not been possible to provide copies of the available conservation objectives as an annex to the HRA report?
I'm going to ask Mr. Hodson to address that, please.
Thank you. Mr. Hodson?
Russ Hodson for the applicant. Yeah, we are currently in the process of collating the relevant information for the UK designated sites, including attributes with the associated sites, features and sub-features. So just to confirm that what you require from us is a full list of conservation objectives and list of attributes for each of the UK sites being considered as part of the appropriate assessment stage of the assessment. Is that correct?
That's correct, please. Yeah, as I say, I'm aware that the information is not fully available for all of the sites, but nevertheless, there are sort of 2-page PDFs for several of the European sites available on the designated sites Natural England website, and it's those that we would like as an appendix, if possible, to the report. So we do have that full audit trail in front of the Secretary of State.
Okay, that we can do. Just to advise that we have started this process. Part of the reason which some of these, particularly the attributes from the supplementary conservation advice, they were a large number of them. For example, Solent Maritime SAC, in terms of pulling together the attribute list for submission at deadline 6, runs to approximately 47 pages just to include those. So they are quite long tables, but these, can and will be provided if that's what you require at deadline 6.
I think if we have those as an electronic appendix to a relevant document, I think that would give all of the information that we and the Secretary of State require.
Yeah, but we can provide that. Could I just confirm that there's no further work which you require for this, such as you'll note as part of Section 10 of the HRA, not all attributes were listed out and justification provided for how they were considered as part of the AA stage. This was agreed with Natural England when we consulted them on a draft HRA prior to submission. I just really want to just confirm that you're happy with an appendices covering the conservation objectives and attributes for submission and not seeking any additional work.
Yeah, just those that are already included as agreed with Natural England will be fine.
Okay, thank you.
If you could actually make that point as part of the process, it would be useful too.
Okay.
Thank you very much for that, Mr. Hodgson. That will be very useful. Do you have any idea what sort of timescale you're working to on that?
Russ Hodgson for the applicant, we are working to submission at deadline 6.
That would be very useful. Thank you very much, Mr. Hodgson.
Sorry, one minor point I would also make, just for an update, is that we noticed in a previous HRA submitted that there was some numbering issues for tables within Section 10. We will update and address these with that resubmission at deadline 6.
So it'll be a complete new report, a replacement report?
Yes, I believe that's the case. Yeah, updated Section 10 tables and appendices for conservation objectives and attributes.
Thank you very much. We look forward to receiving that deadline 6. Are there any other parties who wish to comment on this matter? No, in which case that brings agenda item 3 to a close. And I'm going to move on to agenda item 4. And this is to deal with landscape, visual impacts and tranquility. The first item under this heading relates to lighting. And I'm conscious we'll probably come back to things like cranes later on, but if we can confine this particular item to lighting. For clarity, can the applicant please confirm the number, height and construction of lighting columns and lightning masts at the converter station site, including any on the roofs of the building? We have obviously the transcript from the applicant, so I'll be happy with a summary of the key points in relation to this. Who's going to deal with this, Mr. Bowden?
Ms. Bowden, please, sir.
Thank you, Ms. Bowden.
I'm sorry, Mr. Bird. I'm going to pass that comment to the engineers who are actually dealing specifically with lighting. So that would be Norman MacLeod.
Dr. MacLeod.
Thank you, sir. Good morning, Norman MacLeod on behalf of the applicant. The proposal for lighting within the converter station compound is to install lighting along the perimeter road of the converter station. These are intended to be 6-meter high lighting masts to illuminate the exterior road of the station. In addition, we'll have much taller lighting, intended to be 15 meters tall in the outdoor high voltage equipment. These lights will only ever be used for emergency purposes. The intention of this station is that the station will be unmanned at all times. There'll be no personnel permanently located at the station, and hence no need for lighting at the station. But if any emergency work was required overnight to bring the station back online again, of course, we'd switch on the lights. Similarly, if there's any intruder alarm on the perimeter fence, the lights would come on to allow the CCTV cameras to spot any intruders. I would also make the point that the access road from Broadway Lane to the converter station station site will not be illuminated. There is no intention to have lights along the access road. In terms of lightning masts, these are much taller structures, potentially up to 30 meters in height. These are essential for a station of this type to protect the equipment against direct lightning strikes. A lightning strike could very easily destroy any equipment in the station. And like all tall buildings throughout the country, we provide lightning protection. So a combination of individual lightning masts in the high voltage compound and lightning spikes on top of the large buildings So as I said, the lightning masts could be up to 30 meters in height, typically of a fairly slender construction, either a steel construction, either tubular steel or a matrix type arrangement. On the top of the building, simple spikes to attract lightning, maybe potentially 4 meters tall on the top of the buildings. All of this is intended to be fairly standard equipment, fairly normal station engineering, as we would find in the adjacent Lovedeans high voltage substation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. McLeod. Just for clarity, and I think I do understand, the intention therefore is not to have any lighting along the access road, but to have lighting on the road around the perimeter of the converter station site, but that would only be activated in an emergency. Is that my correct understanding?
Exactly so, sir. It would only ever come on under emergency conditions.
Thank you very much. Does anybody else have a comment or a representation on this matter, please? Okay, I didn't hear any requests there, so I'm going to move on. The next point is we noted the applicant's comment at deadline 2 that there'll be no flashing lights on the lightning masts. And we asked if the applicant could confirm whether this referred to aviation safety lighting, and if any part of the proposed development, including the cranes and other plant that would be used during the construction of the converter station, would require aviation safety lights. Again, we've got your response to this in the transcript, and we have confirmation this does refer to aviation safety lighting. Is there anything to add on that?
No, thank you, sir.
Thank you. We're told that the tall cranes would be retracted at night, but would they be used in the hours of darkness in the morning and evening? And if so, would lighting be required on the tall cranes at these times?
So that's addressed by the construction hours, but again, Dr. McLeod can confirm that.
Thank you, sir. I can confirm that the tall telescopic cranes would not be used in the hours of darkness. That would be dangerous to the personnel. So they would only ever be used during daylight and then retracted overnight. These cranes are not left elevated overnight.
Thank you very much. Does anybody else like to comment on aviation lighting or cranes lighting? Nothing seen there. Moving on then. So the next point was about lighting at the proposed telecommunications building and its compound near to the converter station, and whether that would also be limited to emergency use. Again, we have the summary of we have the transcript from the applicant. A very brief summary would be useful here for the record of that, please.
Ask Ms. Bowden to provide that, please, sir.
Thank you. Ms. Bowden.
Yes, I can cover. So in terms of lighting, telecommunications building will have no lighting except for courtesy lighting above the entrance door, operated by a proximity motion sensor with an automatic turn off. And third-party users of the building will not have the right to install external lights as the lighting scheme will be agreed as part of the lighting scheme for the converter station area in accordance with requirement 6 clause 1 being a part of work number 2, and that approved lighting scheme will be subject to requirement 23, which requires no lighting during the hours of darkness. Also, again, it forms part of work number 2 to which the requirement applies.
Thank you very much, Ms. Burden. Does anybody else wish to raise any questions or points about lighting at the telecommunications building? Nothing raised there. Let's move on again. So I'm moving on now to the proposed development's likely effects on the International Dark Skies Reserve and the degree to which common ground can be confirmed between the applicant and the relevant local authorities. We have seen the most recent updates on position from the South Downs National Park Authority and the relevant local authorities, and it does seem to appear that there is now common ground. Could the applicant please just summarise the position?
Again, Ms. Bowden, please.
Yes, of course. Rita Bowden on behalf of the applicants. So the South Downs National Park International Dark Sky Reserve, designated in May 2016, seeks to protect the dark skies about the national park, as well as the landscape on the ground. In effect, dark skies are a special quality of the South Downs and generally defined as skies relatively free of light pollution, where you can see clearly a clear starry sky. The dark skies are protected through South Downs National Park's local plan policy SD8, which sets out a hierarchy for new development. It also applies different criteria in different areas according to their sensitivity to new lighting. Dark Skies Technical Advice Note, April 2018, provides guidance on the steps to minimise the impact of lightning on dark skies. Reference is made to the International Dark Skies Reserve in section 1.3 of Appendix 15.5 of the South Downs National Park Review. In discussions with South Downs National Park, revisions have been made to the outline onshore camp. The document now includes an obligation under section 5.5.2 for the preparation of a lighting scheme for the construction and operational stages of the converter station area. The lighting scheme makes specific reference to general lighting principles in the South Downs National Park's technical advice note and states that the lighting scheme will, after consultation with the South Downs National Park, be submitted for approval to the relevant local planning authority. It will be developed in accordance with the South Downs National Park Technical Advice Note 2018 Dark Skies. And just to conclude, the updated Statement of Common Ground with the South Downs National Park submitted at deadline 5, which is referred to as REP 05026, states at paragraph 4.5.4 that the inclusion of the lighting scheme in the outline onshore camp has been agreed, and the South Downs National Park's response in question 4D4 states the South Downs National Park is content that the proposed development will not cause harm to the International Dark Skies Reserve.
Thank you very much, Ms. Bowden. Mr. Hughes, did you have anything to say, or anybody in your team, in relation to that?
Thank you, sir. Mike Hughes, the South Downs National Park Authority. Ms. Bowden has given an accurate summation of our views, and I'm happy to say that we've reached common ground with the applicant on this matter. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. And do any of the other local authorities have a comment on this? Or anybody else have a point on the International Dark Skies Reserve? I have a hand. Sorry, I have a hand, but I cannot see it. Oh, it's Mr. Bird, sorry. Bit of feedback, Mr. Bird.
I hope I've corrected the feedback now, sir.
That's much better.
I just wanted to make a brief point. In ISH 1, Mr. Roscoe asked that we consider taking the operational mitigation out of the outline KEMP, which we're presently considering for deadline 6. So the issue of lighting and the detailed lighting for the operational stage is likely to be included in the design principles, which will be translated into the design and access statement. That's just to forewarn you, sir.
Thank you for the warning, and it sounds like quite a sensible suggestion. Okay, so there's no more points on the Dark Skies Reserve. I'm going to... Are there any other questions about lighting generally in relation to the scheme? Mr. Cornwell.
Yes, thank you, sir. I apologise. It's Stephen Cornwell from Winchester City Council. I apologise if this is already covered, but obviously, as I think you've noted, lighting is a sensitive issue, and we have worked hard with the applicant to seek clarification. I've just been looking through the draft development order, and obviously, whilst there is a requirement relating to the lighting scheme, I couldn't immediately see an indication that no additional lighting beyond that which is approved is installed on site. So could I ask the applicant if that was to be included as part of the draft development consent order, please?
I'm happy to ask the applicant on your behalf. So Mr. Jarvis and Mr. Bird, is there anything in the DCO to control additional lighting?
Good morning, sir. So the lighting that may be built is the lighting that's approved. It would not be permissible to build lighting which hasn't been approved, because it would then be out with the terms of that requirement discharge. And the position with regards to the control of operational lighting is covered in requirement 23 already, which confirms that there will be no external lighting of works number 2 during the hours of darkness. Given those matters are already confirmed, sir, it's not considered also necessary to include, for an avoidance of doubt, wording to confirm that no further lighting may be approved after the lighting has been approved. Thank you, sir.
Thank you for that explanation, Mr. Jarvis. Okay, if there's nothing else on lighting, I'm going to move on to subsection E of the agenda, which is the landscape and visual impact assessment. I'm going to ask the applicant please to summarise why the South Downs National Park is said to be of medium sensitivity for the landscape and visual assessment, and in particular how this relates to the usual approach to environmental impact assessment and the guidance set out in GLVIA. The original question says, given the nationally important status of the national park and the purposes behind its designation, does the medium sensitivity rating undervalue its overall importance? Ms. Bowden, are you going to give me a summary of what's in your transcript, please?
Yes, I'm happy to do that.
Thank you.
So the landscape and visual impact assessment was based on an agreed methodology described in further detail in Appendix 15.3, Landscape and Visual Assessment Methodology, App 401. And this is consistent with GLVIA, which is Guidelines for Landscape and Visual Impact Assessment, Edition 3, published in 2013. Table 1.2 of Appendix 15.1, Consultation Responses, App 399, refers to the local authority's agreement of the methodology, which was discussed at a meeting held on the 15th of October 2018. Landscape sensitivity is a combination of judgments in relation to the susceptibility of landscape to the type of change development proposed and the value attached to landscape. The LVIA concluded that the national park was of high sensitivity. The characteristics associated with landscape sensitivity are defined in Table 3 of Appendix 15.3, and high sensitivity is described as landscape character, characteristics and elements where through consideration of the landscape resource and characteristics, there would generally be a lower capacity or scope for landscape change or positive enhancement, and a higher landscape value and quality. Often it includes landscapes which are highly valued for their scenic quality, including most statutorily national, internationally designated landscapes, i.e. the South Downs National Park. It also refers to elements, features that could be described as unique or nationally scarce, and mature vegetation with provenance such as ancient woodland or mature parkland trees, and or mature landscape features which are characteristic of, contribute to a sense of place and illustrate time depth in a landscape, and if replaceable could not be replaced other than in the long term. To inform this judgment, the assessment drew on susceptibility to change, which was considered to be high, with a low ability to accommodate the specific proposed change, undue consequences of the maintenance of the baseline situation, i.e. receptor value, and or achievement of relevant planning policies or strategies, and landscape value with categories based on condition, features, quality and recognition, including national parks. The LVIA therefore considered that the impact on the character areas identified within the national parks were high, as evidenced in Table 2 of Appendix 15.4, App 402. For the South Downs National Park Downland Mosaic D2, Hambledon, Clanfield Downland, the landscape is of high sensitivity. Where there is an overlap of character areas sitting within and outside the national park, namely WCC 17 Hambledon Downs W2 and EHDC LCT Downlands Mosaic 3FI Horndean Clanfield Edge, these were described as being of medium to high sensitivity, with levels increasing progressively away from the converter station area, and where the South Downs National Park exerts an influence in terms of condition and management. This approach is consistently applied throughout the assessment of the local landscape character areas and types within and outside the national park, with the assessment concluding that for both W2 and 3FI, the landscape character within the converter station area and its immediate edges was of immediate sensitivity. In terms of the setting of the national park, the LVIA Appendix 15.5, South Downs National Park, App 403, considered the converter station area in terms of the criteria used in the South Downs landscape background paper to the local plan, and found it to be of mixed value and therefore of medium sensitivity. The criteria used for determining setting in Table 1 was based on guidance for assessing landscape for designations as national parks, or areas of outstanding natural beauty in England, and this was produced by Natural England in 2011. This covered landscape quality, such as intactness, condition and influence, scenic quality, relative wilderness, relative tranquility, natural heritage features and cultural heritage. Whilst landscape value and susceptibility to change were not stated as such, the assessment drew on the methodology referred to in App 401 to inform the judgment on sensitivity as well as conclusions. In terms of medium susceptibility to change, which is identified in Table 1 of Appendix 401, it refers to a moderate ability to accommodate specific proposed change, some undue consequences for the maintenance of baseline situation, and or achievement of relevant planning policies or strategies. Table 2, which refers to medium value, covers regional recognition, none of which is specific under this category to the area of the converter station, and a number of distinguishing features, worth of conservation, evidence of degradation, and occasional detracting features, and ordinary to good quality landscape or features with some potential substitution. A reasonably attractive landscape it refers to, or feature. The findings, just to conclude, in relation to the setting of the national park, don't undervalue the importance of the national park. Rather, it recognises that the area is not designated because it doesn't meet the standards required for designation, which were informed by the criteria outlined in Appendix 15.5, South Downs National Park. And that concludes my summary. Apologies.
Thank you very much, Ms. Bowden. Mr. Hughes, I think this was originally came from the South Downs National Park Authority question. Is there anything you wish to add, or Ms. Butcher?
Thank you, sir. It's Mike Hughes, the South Downs National Park Authority. We have nothing further to add on this point at this stage. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Is there anything else from any of the local authorities or indeed any other party on this matter? Nothing seen there. Ms. Bowden, can you confirm, you referred there to some 2011 Natural England guidance on the setting of protected landscapes.
Yes. Can
you confirm whether or not that is in examination?
So the actual document isn't, but we're more than happy to submit a copy of that particular document if needed.
Is it referenced in your app?
Yes, it's. Apologies, sir. Yes, it's referenced in Appendix Appendix 15.5, South Downs National Park, App 403.
That'll be fine. We can find it. Thank you very much, Ms. Bowden.
Thank you.
And anything else on that point? Okay, and the next point, in which case it's for the South Downs National Park Authority. Please could you confirm the relevance and importance of the additional viewpoints you've requested in answer to our first written question, LV 191? Can you explain what additional benefits there would be from understanding the proposed development from those representative viewpoints? And is there an update on common ground with the applicant on this matter? Mr. Hughes?
Thank you, sir. It's me, myself, Robin Butcher, answering the question on behalf of the South Downs National Park. So the South Downs have requested 2 additional viewpoints, one being the viewpoint from the east of Prue's Hangar, and one being a viewpoint to the east of the site access road entrance. Taking the first viewpoint, the reason that the South Downs requested this is because it's of a very different nature to other viewpoints 1, 12 and 17 that cover the same angle of the view. The viewpoint we've requested is 1 kilometre closer to the converter station than viewpoint 1, and it's also around 30 metres lower than viewpoint 1. It gives a very different nature of view, with a far clearer and closer view of the converter station without any intervening blocks of vegetation. It also shows the converter station set against the more distant landform of Portsdown Hill, one of the key elements of views from the South Downs Park when looking south towards this range of hills. The other viewpoint that mentioned 12 is a viewpoint that's much closer to the converter station at a lower elevation than the one we have requested. This viewpoint 12 looks at the converter station through an intervening line of trees. And viewpoint 17, which is also in the same direction, is from Butser Hill and is a far more distant view and doesn't give that level of detail to enable the South Downs to make a much better judgment or consideration on the potential effects of the converter station from the South Downs National Park. The second view that we've requested is at the entrance to the access road, where this is set on the boundary of the South Downs National Park, and we feel that the proposals at this point give rise to quite considerable landscape and visual changes, and it's also one of the most highly viewed areas on a busy road close to the position of the proposed converter station. The changes on the west side of the road, where you have the new access entrance to the access road, will result in change from a rather enclosed hedge-lined lane with quite a rural character to a far more open character, with loss of vegetation and a new access point with associated signage, gates, etc. There's also a complete reconfiguration on the opposite side of the road on the junction of Days Lane and Broadway Lane, with the loss of an existing hedge, provision of a additional roadway, new hedges, and presumably considerable signage, and what looks like 3 sets of new gates. Again, this would help the South Downs, the provision of this would help the South Downs to make a much better judgment on the consideration of potential effects on the South Downs National Park. Thank you.
Ms. Butcher, thank you. Could you just confirm or otherwise my understanding of what you just said? So in relation to the first additional, it's not actually an additional viewpoint, but it's a refinement of something you asked for originally, which was not perhaps fully reflected in what you received?
Yes, it's a refinement of what we'd requested for originally. We still haven't had that view provided.
Thank you. And in terms of the second one, which is the entrance to the access road, is your concern there in relation to the setting of the national park, or is it a concern relating to one of the roads which brings visitors into the national park?
It's a concern regarding both. The road runs along the immediate boundary of the South Downs National Park, and it affects the immediate setting of the South Downs National Park at that point, and no viewpoint has been provided at this point in the application.
Thank you very much. Ms. Bowden, we understand the applicant has arranged to take photographs from these viewpoints. Can you tell us when we expect to see them in examination?
Yes, we've taken photographs from the additional viewpoints, and we're willing to offer these at deadline 6. Just to confirm, these will just be photographs and not visualizations, including a wireframe.
That's understood. Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other submissions on this matter, please? Nothing heard there. So I'm going to move on to the next point, which is a request to the applicant to explain why the cranes to be used in the construction of the proposed converter station were not included in the landscape and visual impact assessment, the effect these will have on landscape and views, over what extent and what period, and originally we asked if an additional assessment might be necessary as a result. We also want to know why the applicant considers that the significance of construction stage effects would not change as a result of their presence. We will be looking for comments also from the South Downs National Park Authority and the relevant local planning authorities in relation to this. Again, we have your transcript, Ms. Bowden, but a summary would be very useful.
Yes, of course, sir. So The landscape visual impact assessment states under section 15.46 app 103 that the assessment of the converter station was principally based on the maximum parameter design envelope as designed in by the converter station and telecommunications building parameter plans sheet 1 to 3, which form part of the application. On this basis, the whole of the converter station was assessed rather than specific elements, which then would be aggregated. This is a standard approach for assessing effects. The construction of the building of the size of the converter station would require craneage. The LVI didn't expressly refer to the cranes, but the presence of large machinery was factored into the construction stage assessment. The description of specific construction impacts, paragraph 15.3.6.2 of app 130, mentioned the visual presence of large machinery. This was written with the scale of the construction operation in mind. HDD equipment is then specifically mentioned to draw attention to the large machinery in places where this might not immediately be expected. The significance of construction stage effects would not change in light of details of the crane dimensions. This is because the assessment, app 130, already finds the highest level of adverse effect, major adverse, where the development work would be visually prominent and close to sensitive receptors during construction. For example, residential receptors number 1, 2, 10, 11 and 12, 11, 12 and 13, for example, and major to moderate for other residential receptors edging the converter station with a direct view of construction activities. Such receptors are of high sensitivity and would experience either a large or to medium magnitude of change. For recreational receptors, moderate to major effects and moderate effects would be experienced during construction, where such receptors are in the immediate vicinity of the works. This includes users of the Monarch's Way, who would experience moderate to major effects. Like residential receptors, such users would be of high sensitivity based on a high susceptibility to change and a high value landscape, resulting in high sensitivity. As stated in our table 9 in the methodology appendix, appendix 15.5, a major adverse effect describes the development would become prominent feature and would result in a very noticeable change to an existing highly sensitive and well-composed view. A moderate effect, by comparison, states that the effect would result in some enhancing or distracting features to an existing or highly sensitive or well-composed view, or one which is prominent with a less well-composed or less sensitive view, resulting in notable improvement or deterioration in the existing view. Going in terms of the cranes themselves, it's an important point to make that these would not be tower cranes with large upper parts in place full time. The contractor would use a very large mobile crane for logistical and commercial reasons because it would provide a long horizontal reach. The most suitable would be a 500-ton mobile crane with a telescopic boom that would extend 84 meters. The mobile cranes are anticipated to be in use for 8 months out of the 3-year construction period, and this is referred to in Rep 3014. The up to 84 refers to the typical maximum length of the boom. For a crane up to 26 meters high, it would be unusual for such a crane to be used vertically. As a mobile crane with a telescopic boom, it would only be a noticeable feature. Whilst in use. When not in use, such cranes are normally parked in their retracted position, as we referred to before, which would be 5 meters high when parked. That finishes my summary, sir.
Thank you very much. In addition to the sort of considerations of size and scale that you just mentioned, does the movement of these cranes add a new consideration to the visual assessment from some viewpoints and other receptors?
No, from our perspective, there would be a lot of other activity on site. Yes, appreciating that the cranes would move slightly to adjust their position. I very much consider that those cranes would be relatively static once up and then move down sort of during night time to their parked positions. The engineers may be able to clarify that in a little bit more detail in terms of the nature of the movement, but I anticipate that it would extend over the actual large buildings themselves.
I'm thinking probably particularly here about some of the receptors, which may be at some distance, which will not necessarily have views at ground level and some of the activities going on nearer ground level, but might see the tops of the cranes from some distance, and whether movement would be added to those considerations in terms of visual assessments.
That has been considered already as part of the assessment process, but it wasn't considered to be wasn't considered to change the result of the effect.
Thank you. Mr. Hughes, is there a response or a comment from South Downs National Park Authority on this matter? Or Ms. Butcher?
It's Robin Butcher on behalf of South Downs National Park. The South Downs National Park do feel that the position and the movement, the height of the cranes is important in that visual impact assessment, most notably in the long views, as you say, but also in close views from the Monarch's Way, where the cranes will be highly visible above the height of intervening and above the general working area of building the converter stations. And we would like to see that assessment revised to include the impact of those cranes.
Thank you. Do any of the other local authorities have a comment on this? Mr. Cornwell.
Thank you, sir. Stephen Cornwell from Winchester City Council. I noticed Ms. Bowden said that it wouldn't be practice for contractors to use a tower crane. In my experience, tower cranes are appearing much more commonly on construction sites than they used to do. And I wondered whether the applicant was going to make it a specific requirement when contractors were being asked to tender to construct this building that they didn't use tower cranes, as obviously they would have a much more permanent presence in the landscape. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I come back to that in one moment? Just checking if there's any other comments from any other parties before I ask for a response to that, perhaps Mr. Jarvis. Anybody else with a comment on this visual assessment in relation to cranes? Can't see anything. Mr. Jarvis, do you or one of your team wish to come back on Mr. Cornwell's point?
If I may come back on Ms. Butcher's point, firstly, I think Ms. Bowden's clearly explained how we have assessed the impacts of cranes and their movement, both in short and long distance views. So I'm not entirely sure what further assessment is being requested, given it has already been assessed. But if the South Downs National Park would like to clearly put forward a position in writing that we could consider, that would be helpful, should it still be considered that it's necessary to either reconfirm how they've been assessed despite the submissions, or what further assessment they consider is required. And with regards to Mr. Cornwell's comment, I would note that it's already addressed in the sense that it will be mobile cranes that are used and that they will be kept parked overnight. So I think the matter is already adequately addressed, but I can nonetheless recheck the documents to confirm that position is clear, because there is no anticipation that tower cranes would be used, taking into account the building that is to be constructed and the equipment that's required to do that. Thank you, sir.
I think Mr. Cornwell's point was, is there anything in the DCO to prevent tower cranes being used, Mr. Jarvis?
I think my point was I think it's addressed in the SEMP, but if it's not already addressed in the SEMP that's to be complied with in accordance with the requirements, then we can look to address that in the SEMP, sir.
Thank you. Could I ask for a post-hearing note on that particular point? And could I also ask for a post-hearing note, it could be the same one in fact, rather than, well, in addition to the South Downs National Park Authority perhaps providing some further information on their concerns, could the applicant please do a short note just to point out where in the documentation, the application documents, there's evidence that the movement of the cranes and the presence of these cranes has been covered in the LVIA? Would that be possible, Ms. Bowden?
Yes, we can't point specifically to it because, as referred to, so we only considered the parameters, but we're happy to actually describe that further for you, sir.
Thank you very much. That'll be very useful. Does anybody else have another point on this issue? Nothing heard there. So the final point in relation to this, I'm conscious we're going to have a break very shortly. The final point under this heading relates to the proposed car park, work number 3. How this was assessed in the LVIA. We do have the applicant's transcript on this. I'm happy with it. So unless any other party has a question or comment on that, I intend to move on. Anybody with a comment on the construction car park? Nothing seen there. We're going to take a short break in a moment. Before I do, just for clarity and to square the circle, we talked about lighting earlier on, Mr. Jarvis. We talked about emergency lighting at the optical regeneration, telecoms building, pardon me. Would the same process also apply to the optical regeneration station? i.e. is the only permanent lighting emergency and access lighting?
I believe that to be the case, sir, but I will need to double check. But the point is noted, and where we need to cover that in the requirements also, we will do so.
Thank you very much. Ms. Colquhoun, you have a question?
Thank you, sir. Yes, I was going to raise this later under agenda item 4H, because the ORS comes into some references made by AQUIND in response to matters that related to the telecoms building. So I can deal with it then or now, but I'm grateful to hear that the applicant is prepared to consider the same approach in terms of controlling lighting at the ORS as well.
If you could raise that later again at the appropriate point, Ms. Colquhoun, that would be useful. Thank you.
Very good, sir.
It's 10 past 11. We take a short screen break. In fact, it's just gone 10 past 11. Could we reconvene, please, at 11:18? Thank you very much.